New Jersey, this is Low Fidelity. I'm Jeff Heller.
And from beautiful Brooklyn, New York, I'm Josh Boerman. On this episode, we will be reviewing Q, Are We Not Men? A, We Are DEVO by DEVO.
Before we get things started, please don't forget to support this podcast by hitting the like button on this video and subscribing to the channel.
And you are always welcome to share any feedback in the comments or send us an email at feedback@lowfidelity.info.
Welcome to the show, everybody. And yes, we indeed have a guest host for this episode. Thank you for coming on the show, Josh.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. A little peek behind the curtain here. Had to scrap the first take because my radiator was too loud and I needed a Red Bull, but now I am truly ready to go.
Truly caffeinated and ready to record.
Absolutely. I've got the 16-ounce can because I'm really feeling it today. I need to get my full recommended daily value of sugar.
Well, so you are originally from the podcast, The Worst of All Possible Worlds, and you introduced that podcast by saying that you are the worst of all possible Joshes.
That's right.
However, with this Red Bull, I would argue we're actually going to get the best possible Josh for this recording.
I mean, at the very least, it's going to be the most caffeinated of all possible Joshes. Jury's still out on quality. I guess we'll have a sense by the end of the episode.
Yeah, for sure. And for anybody who's not familiar, check out the latest episode, as of this recording anyway, where you cover the movie The Social Network by David Fincher. That was from 2010. Hilarious episode. I really enjoyed listening to it. And yeah, Josh, I'm so excited to have you here because during our initial conversations, again, a little peek behind the curtain, you were bringing up some albums that you wanted to cover. And one of them, though not this one, was by DEVO. And I feel like this is one of those bands that has escaped me all my life, even though it feels like I would be the perfect person to listen to them.
Yeah, I think we put together a list of quite a few potential albums that I'd love to talk about because on our show, we mostly cover a range of media, video games, movies, TV shows. Musical theater is a big focus of ours, but we don't do popular music very often. Generally speaking, if we're talking about music, it's within the context of musical theater. So I was just like, here are a bunch of albums that I either really, really love or love quite a bit, but find interesting. And I'd say that Q, Are We Not Men? A, We Are DEVO is an album that I truly love. But I think the DEVO album that I proposed originally was
the second, Duty Now for the Future.
That's right, Duty Now. That's right. Which I actually think is not as good of an album as Q, Are We Not Men overall. But what's interesting about it is that you can sort of see a band that is in transition from what you see in Q, Are We Not Men, which is this very like punk type sound. And they're starting to branch out a little bit more into electronic instruments. And, you know, during the later part of the 80s, that sort of more electronic thing would come to define their sound a little bit more. But with this album, we're still very firmly in the world of punk rock. And it's remarkable to me, this album, like just how ahead of its time it still feels.
That's a great way to start this off, I think. Why don't we just go straight into the review?
All right.
DEVO emerged from Akron, Ohio as an art collective centered on the idea of de-evolution, the belief that humanity has evolutionarily peaked and is now regressing. Conceived in the wake of the 1970 Kent State Massacre, bassist Gerald Casale and fellow art student Bob Lewis began crafting the collective's ethos of subverting popular culture and exposing the depths of human stupidity. A couple of years later, things kickstarted musically when they brought in a few friends and part-time art student Mark Mothersbaugh. Performing as sextet DEVO, Mark contributed as keyboardist and fellow provocateur. As the collective evolved through the mid-70s, with Gerald's brother Bob joining on rhythm guitar, Mark's brother Bob eventually replacing Lewis on lead guitar, and Alan Myers taking over for Mark's brother Jim on drums, DEVO began making waves with their jagged, satirical brand of punk pop.
Their experimentation with various forms of media led them to pioneer the music video years before MTV, even writing and starring in an award-winning short film about de-evolution directed by Chuck Statler. Their vision caught the attention of David Bowie and Iggy Pop, who pushed them to get signed to a major label. Initially, Bowie was set to produce their debut, but Hollywood obligations forced him to pass the reins to his friend, Brian Eno. The result was a debut like no other. 11 tracks of twisted offbeat punk rock that laid the foundation for a legacy of soundtracking humanity's decline.
You like that? Soundtracking?
Yeah, it's pretty accurate, I think.
For those who don't know, much later on, Mark Mothersbaugh would become like a soundtracking aficionado.
The
He's
Sims
done so
2?
many. The Sims
Holy
2,
cow, his work on The Sims 2 is so good.
and Rugrats, and my favorite of his is the Royal Tenenbaum soundtrack.
Oh, I didn't know that was Mark.
Yeah, so he is certainly the most forward-facing person, but we're actually going to get a little bit into that as we get into the beginnings of this review. But I actually want to start off first by asking you, Josh, about how you discovered the band.
Well, so my mom was actually a pretty big devotee back in the day. And my exposure to them was mostly their more popular stuff. Whip It is obviously the one that everybody knows. But I sort of got back into them in a major way a few years ago because Devo did that tour, that very brief tour, including when they came to New York City, and I missed that gig. But I wanted to start listening to that stuff again. And I part of it too was that I think it was Chris Wade on Chapo Trap House did an interview with Jerry, and it was so good. And I was like, oh yeah, I really like Devo. I should get back into them again. And so just ended up going right through their back catalog again and was mostly just like, oh my God, I've been spending so much of my life without this music. Why did I not do this earlier?
That sounds so similar to my own story. Just that last part, because like I said in the beginning, I have been aware of this band, obviously, because Whip It is, it's not arguable. There's no debate. It is their most popular song.
Oh yeah. Not their best song, but certainly their most popular.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. It's just astonishing that it's even come up now that I can finally listen to this and have that first experience.
There's something about this album that is just so comprehensive, for lack of a better way of putting it. It taps into so many different sounds and goes in so many different directions. And I don't think it's necessarily 100% successful, but it's trying so much. And for that alone, I think it's really remarkable.
There is, I think, a little bit of required listening that can be done before tackling this album. Like if you want to soften the blow, if you will, of getting into Devo's debut here. I put in here Roxy Music as required listening, specifically the early years, the first two albums, and it had Brian Eno as a keyboardist. And that is the eponymous debut from 1972 and the For Your Pleasure album from 1973. You really get a chance to hear what Eno does, the types of innovations that he brings to sometimes guitar, but really more so on keyboards.
I'm not convinced that you need anything going in. I certainly think that it helps to know what the Brian Eno sound is and what it does. The thing is, if you've listened to popular music, you will see the way that things about this album have impacted what we consider music to even be, especially in terms of syncopation. I think that later work that came well after this that I might recommend looking into would be stuff by Battles and Foals, both of which, in terms of like the quality of the percussion especially, really, I think calls back to this. But in terms of forebears, I don't know. I'm not sure that I necessarily would say that there's any required listening.
Interesting. I definitely see what you're saying about not needing anything, but I'm going to argue against it with just one song from none other than Weird Al Yankovic from 1985.
Oh, yeah.
Talk with your mouth full. Bite the hand that feeds you. Bite on more than you can chew. What can you do?
Not musically, because it is more synthesizer heavy and this is much more of a punk band arrangement, but from a lyrical standpoint, Dare to Be Stupid is the ethos of Devo to a very basic extent, but the song is a nice simplistic version of it. Even Mark Mothersbaugh himself has said that Weird Al kind of pulled the rug out from under him.
Yeah, it was the VH1 Behind the Music on Weird Al, where he was like, he made a perfect Devo song, and I hate him for that.
Yep, perfect quote. Definitely agree there. Okay, we are going to do this review track by track, but what we normally do before we get into things is talk about the thematic elements, and these are things that appear throughout the album. We could start this off by going into the lore of Devo. To be quite honest with you, though, I actually want to skip a majority of it because we're going to bring it up within the review in different places. Plus, there's just so much to this. I mean, you could talk about Jerry Casale being a hippie and the Kent State Massacre, forcing him out of that mind state. The whole idea of high-low, which is using high concepts and disguising them or hiding them within low art forms to reach a popular audience, which is a subversive tactic that is certainly certainly going to be evident here. The fact that they're an art collective versus a performance, and performance group, and not so much a music group when they start off necessarily. Just like we said in the intro, they have this stint as Sextet Devo when they perform at the 1973 Kent State Performing Arts Festival. From there, getting gigs and playing and saying that they'll play covers, but instead playing their own material, which upsets the audience and causing a lot of antagonism. It's very much punk rock ethos. And I think actually what I do want to say as sort of like a wrap around this whole thing is that you're not going to hear me say the words new wave all that often here, because I really think that this is more of a punk album than a new wave album.
I agree. Yeah, I think Devo gets lumped into new wave, but I think it's pretty inaccurate. New wave as a movement, the aesthetic is different for one thing, but I also think that what it's trying to do is different. I think Devo, they get seen retroactively as futurists, but that really wasn't what they were going for, I don't think.
It really doesn't sound that way. It definitely describes the current. If there's anything futuristic about it, it's more so, I guess, like the consequences of this de-evolution. But that's a lyrical thing, not so much in the music.
And I think you have to also see it mostly, I mean, you mentioned the Kent State shootings. I don't think you get a band like Devo without the Vietnam War. Like that, it's just so, that moment in American history split the generation, sort of like the late boomer generation. It sort of split them in a few different ways. One direction, which we've actually talked about on our show, was into just total absurdism as escape. I think that's maybe best epitomized by Zucker Abraham Zucker, the Kentucky Fried Theater guys, who of course later would go on to make Airplane. They basically said, we don't want to engage with the politics of the moment at all. We think it's bullshit, and we would rather be able to just make you laugh. And we think that there is value in that escapism. Now, I ultimately think that's a pretty reactionary way of seeing things, and so it's no surprise that the Zuckers and Abrams, all of them, ended up going pretty hard right toward the end of... Oh, yeah, no, it's like a whole... Actually, David Zucker, who sort of gave Dennis Prager his big way in to movies and shit like that. Yeah, no, we've talked a lot about this shit on our show, but all I'm trying to say here is they also point to Kent State and all of that shit as their origin. Now, big difference, of course, the Zuckers were in Wisconsin at the time, whereas Devo were in Ohio. They were right fucking there. And as a rule, I don't respect Ohio, nor do I respect people from Ohio, because I grew up in Michigan, and so it's like, it's obligatory. But I do respect Devo for taking this thing and making what I do think is a pretty, at least for the time, radical and political form of art and music.
Interesting that you say that. The people outside who take this sort of situation in a different form from the people who are actually there.
Because they were students at Kent State at the time, weren't they?
Yeah, Casale lost friends.
Yeah, shit.
That is absolutely critical to bring up here. And going back into the musical side of things, I actually want to talk a little bit about Brian Eno's production, which this is still relatively early in his production career. And just an interesting side note, he funded this recording himself.
Really?
They were one of those bands that had such a following of people who were in the industry already. David Bowie, Iggy Pop, Tony Basil. They were all in the early parts of their career trying to get them popular, get them signed, get them recorded. And the band themselves were actually pushing back against it, pacing themselves to make sure that they were even ready to get to that point, even though they abandoned Ohio and went to the West Coast to try and make a name for themselves. When we get to Brian Eno, they have still yet to be signed, but they're brought into the studio on Eno's dime just so they can get something recorded for a major release without actually being signed to a major label yet. This is sort of like the reverse of what you normally see in this process. And yet, at the same time, when you listen to the recording, this is actually mostly Devo's compositions. It's their style, it's their instrumentations, and Eno's given a back seat to most of this, surprisingly.
Yeah, it's very, very different from most other Brian Eno productions because, I mean, you think about like U2, for instance. You don't get U2 as we know them without the Brian Eno sound. You don't get Talking Heads without the Brian Eno sound, I would argue.
Yeah, so at this point, we're really focusing more on like this homegrown sound that comes from this band just randomly out of Ohio. I do actually want to also mention, since there's really not much to say about Eno's contributions here, besides maybe some little things here and there that even Mother's Boss says, yeah, we kind of use some of his stuff, but not really. We have engineers Connie Plank and Patrick Gleason who have done work separately for Kraftwerk and Eno before. In the case of Connie Plank, and with Gleason, he was the keyboardist for Herbie Hancock, who he was actually brought brought into the fold because of his knowledge of synthesizers. So he's kind of the person who introduced Herbie Hancock to the synthesizer. And he ends up doing tracks 9 and 11. That's Come Back Johnny and Shrivel Up.
Oh, yeah.
Now, next up, I want to also mention that Mark Mothersbaugh, while he is a very heavy part of the Devo aesthetic and a lot of the public face of Devo, because he sings the majority of songs here, it's really not his project. Devo is...
It's Jerry.
It's Jerry Casale. He's the guy behind the ethos. He's behind the message.
And I mean, obviously, we're not going to talk about Devo's last album, Last As of Now album, which I think has a couple good songs, but a big piece of the reason that album, for me at least, doesn't work as a Devo album is that it sounds like a Mark Mothersbaugh album.
What I do want to mention, though, is that with Mothersbaugh, and this is really consistent across the album, the title of my note here is Vibrato via Fairy and Noise via Eno. The reason why I say that is because his contribution to this cannot be understated at all. In fact, I want to pull a quote from Rip It Up and Start Again by Simon Reynolds. He says here that one of the group's biggest inspirations was the glam grotesquerie of early rock music. You can hear Brian Ferry's android vibrato in Mothersbaugh's Edge of Hysteria bleat, while his approach on playing synth owed a lot to Eno. Quote, I love his asymmetric atonal synth solos in Roxy. He brought a whole new way to think about the instrument as opposed to Rick Wakeman and Keith Emerson, who just sounded like glorified organists, end quote. I don't disagree, because I mean, if you listen to Emerson, Lake and Palmer, if you listen to Yes, they're going nuts on these synthesizers, but they don't really push the boundaries and make them noisy. They're just sort of replicating the organ, which has its place, but it's not the same thing as like what Eno does, where he really kind of expands what the sound of the synthesizer can be.
Which obviously, speaking as a big electronic music guy, that's what I find exciting. It's like, what can we do with these electronic instruments that you cannot do with a more conventional instrument?
Now, I want to also reintroduce the band one more time, because in the intro, there's a lot of switching hands. It kind of gets a little confusing. So to bring us back to who is on this album and what they do, I actually want to start off by talking about Alan Myers.
Oh, yeah.
My God, man. They nickname him the Human Metronome for good reason. He is phenomenal across this entire album. The drumming is fantastic. And next to that, we have Gerald Casale. He's mostly playing the bass here. He does have some vocal parts and sometimes keyboards as well. Not specifically sure where that is, but apparently he does a little bit of that here. Mark Mothersbaugh, again, one more time, he's basically going to be main vocalist here, also going to be the main person on keyboards, and a little bit of rhythm guitar, although on Satisfaction, he's playing the lick, so that would be lead guitar to me.
That.
Oh no, if you watch it live, it's that's him.
Oh, okay.
Now, in addition to this Mothersbaugh, we also have Bob Mothersbaugh. He's also named Bob 1, and he's the guy who usually plays lead guitar. He also contributes some vocals. And we also have Bob Casale, who is Bob 2, and he's the rhythm guitarist, also some keyboards and some vocals as well.
Okay, well, when we get to Satisfaction, I need to figure out which Bob is doing which guitar.
Yeah, I honestly, I'm not going to be much help there too. I watched the Saturday Night Live performance.
Oh, it's so good.
Incredible. I've watched it more than enough times. Unfortunately, if you show it as is, you will get copyright claimed. So the ones that are on YouTube right now are shaky cam.
Right.
And so it really doesn't help when you're trying to tell who's trying to play what part.
Makes sense.
All right, that's going to bring it into the track by track review. We're going to start with track 1, Uncontrollable Urge. What a start to this album. Josh, I want to start off with your opinion first. As a starter, what do you think of this track?
Yeah, so I mean, earlier I said that Whip It is not the best Devo song, and that's because Uncontrollable Urge is.
No kidding.
That is my opinion, yes.
Amazing.
I fucking love this song. The thing that is so remarkable about it is that the first time, as with most of this album actually, the first time you hear it, it doesn't even sound like there's really a melody. It's like, what is going on here? Like it's up, it's down, it's over. It sounds, especially for something from around this time period, like they're just fucking making it up as they go along. And then you go back and you listen to it again, and it's like, oh no, this is very intricate, and it is using the propulsiveness, both lyrically and musically, of its composition to make you feel the way that the song is. Like to put you in the mindset of the message of the song itself. You've got this uncontrollable urge and you gotta scream and shout it.
Yep, and it helps that you've got this wavering voice of Mark Mothersbaugh to really sell that concept. Also, the surfer guitar in this track. If this wasn't as in your face as it was, I would say this could fit in really well with like that mid-60s surfing guitar music. Like it could fit next to a Beach Boys song pretty well, I think.
Except that it couldn't, right? And that's why I love it so much, is that cards on the table, I think the Beach Boys are just fine. That's always been my controversial like pop music opinion. I was like, Pet Sounds, it's so amazing. I think it's fine. I get why people value it in the way that they do. I get that at the time it was like, whoa, pop music can be doing a number of different things. But I think it's ultimately musically fairly pat, whereas this just feels like it's coming out and grabbing you. And there's something so compelling about starting your album with this too, because it's just like, if you don't like this, fuck you. This is what we're here to do. We are here to make you feel weird. And if you don't like the way that this sounds, you probably won't like us.
That's a great way to start off an album, right? You have to set the tone. I think this definitely does it. Who could have predicted that beginning part with Mother's Ball going, yeah, 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 yeah. Who could have predicted that would have been like the soundtrack to like almost every teen movie from that point afterward?
I'm always a little surprised too when it turns up in ads, which does happen every once in a while. Whip It is a far more common soundtracking for ads.
Yeah.
Famously, I think it was Swiffer used it for a while, and it was like, Swiffer's good, which is nothing, but I'm glad that Mark Mothersbaugh and company are making money on it. You know, good to make that bag. But I think you tend to only hear that first bit. When you get more into the build part where it's the uncontrolled urge, I've got to tell you all about it.
And I'm controlling the baby, screaming John, and I said, yeah. He said, yeah. And I said, yeah, yeah. He said, yeah, yeah. And I said, yeah. Yeah. And I said, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. And I said, yeah, 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 yeah.
The like call and response piece, that's actually, I think, my favorite part of the song.
Yeah, I like that too. Actually, it's also inviting to the listener as well when you have stuff like that. It's almost like when you include hand claps or other noises to mimic the sound of a song live. So it encourages people to sing along or to clap along. At the end, that call and response definitely hints at that as well.
The one other thing about Uncontrollable Urge that I just wanted to say is that my niece, who is now 3 years old, every time I see her and have seen her since she was a baby, I have always played Uncontrollable Urge because it is a bouncy song that even when she was a baby made her smile a lot. And Devo is for the children is the only other thing I'm going to say.
Devo is for the children, for sure. Although I will say this next song, not so much for the children.
I mean, you could even take Uncontrollable Urge to be about sex. It could be, you know, people have different uncontrollable urges to do different things. Personally, though, for me, it's about having the urge to just do something.
But let's take it over to a song where it is almost undeniably about girly action, if you will. That is going to be a cover of the Rolling Stones' I Can't Get No Satisfaction. Now, when we were initially having our conversation about how we were going to do this episode, Josh, you were telling me that this was the best cover of the song, right?
Yeah, I think it's one of the best covers of any song ever made. That's why I think this album is so impressive. You get that 1-2 punch of Uncontrollable Urge into Satisfaction. The first thing is, in many ways, reshaping like what you think guitar-centric punk is, and then it turns right around and it tears down what is already a rock classic, albeit a pretty recent one, tears it apart, puts it back together again, and shoves a grenade up its ass.
To start things off, having that metric ambiguity, having trouble finding the one, that is certainly a way to keep it off kilter, but then also welcome Devo into a mainstream context. Because by taking a standard, something that people recognize, doing it in your own way, there's that attempt to make that connection with a broader audience. And I think Devo kind of do that same thing here with this cover of Satisfaction, though there are, of course, things that make it different. I mean, again, Mothersbaugh here. The anxiety in his voice is undeniable. And it just, I think it sells the point of the song way better than the original song does. Because I'm not going to take credit for this joke. This was on the Chapo Trap House interview that you referenced, Josh, where they said that you listen to the original version and you know Mick Jagger's got no problem getting Satisfaction. Come on.
Exactly. That's not going to be a problem for a guy like him. I don't know if you saw the interview with Jerry in the New Yorker where he was talking about bringing this cover to Mick Jagger so that he could get him to sign off on it. Did you read this one?
No, I didn't.
Okay, so I just want to read a little bit here. This is from The New Yorker, September 15, 2017. The story behind Devo's iconic cover of the Rolling Stones' Satisfaction by Ray Padgett. One afternoon in 1978, Mark Mothersbaugh and Gerald Casale, the two prime architects of the band Devo, were fidgeting in Peter Rudge's office near the Warwick Hotel in Manhattan with Mick Jagger. Rudge was the Rolling Stones manager, and Devo had recorded an odd cover of the band's hit I Can't Get No Satisfaction. So odd that their label said they needed Jagger's blessing to release it. Mothersbaugh put the tape in a boombox and pressed play. As the sounds of the cover filled the room, Jagger sat stone-faced. What he was hearing didn't sound much like the satisfaction he'd written. Keith Richards' iconic riff was gone, and the original melody was nowhere to be found. Was this a homage, Mick must have wondered, or were they mocking it? He was just looking down at the floor, swirling his glass of red wine, Casale recently remembered, adding, he didn't even have shoes on, just socks and some velour pants. I don't know what his habits were then, but this was early afternoon, and it looked like he'd just gotten up. For 30 seconds or so, the men sat in silence, listening to the weird robo-funk coming from the boombox. Then, something changed. He suddenly stood up and started dancing around on this Afghan rug in front of the fireplace, Casale said of Jagger. The sort of rooster man dance he used to do and saying, I like it, I like it. Mark and I lit up, big smiles on our faces like in Wayne's World, we're not worthy. To see your icon that you grew up admiring, that you had seen in concert, dancing around like Mick Jagger being Mick Jagger, it was unbelievable. We were less than nothing, Mothersbaugh said. We were just these artists that nobody had ever heard of from Akron, Ohio.
Hey, 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 that's what I say. I can't get no satisfaction. I can't get me no satisfaction. I can't get no satisfaction. I can't get me no satisfaction. No, I can't get no.
Oh, that's phenomenal. And Jagger being Jagger in front of them.
Yeah.
I don't blame Jagger for loving this.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. I mean, in many ways, I think it comes so much closer to the true feeling of what the song is attempting to accomplish. Because, again, I don't like the original all that much. I think it's fine. This is my opinion on most music. I think most music is just fine. That's how I feel about quite a bit of the Rolling Stones as well.
Yeah, so then I really, the only thing I have to add to this is that I do find that there are some interesting moments in here where lyrically there are, excuse me while I kiss this guy moments. Mm-hmm. We have girly action instead of girl reaction, which is apparently what the original lyric is.
Girl reaction? That's not anything. That doesn't mean anything. What are you talking about, Mick?
Now, here's the thing. I've seen this in the lyric video for the song on YouTube. Is it in the official lyrics? I don't think the original song had a lyric sheet, therefore,
right.
This could be just like a product of some intern putting this on YouTube. I'm willing to accept that that's how it actually is. Also, Mark sings flying around the world instead of riding around the world, which is supposedly in the original lyrics as well. Interesting. I think it has just a lot to do with them listening to the song and going with what they think it's about rather than staying true to the actual. I mean, look, the baby, obviously not in the actual song.
It's so good.
Incredible here. Incredible. It sells the anxiety. It sells the whole wound up protagonist.
Well, yeah, no, exactly. It's like, I need this from you.
Yep.
Please, for the love of God. I've been flying around the world on my tour jet, right? Like, I just gotta get some satisfaction, please.
Yep. Exactly. It's so funny. We're still in a fast-paced, high-tempo sound when we get into the next track, Praying Hands. Track 3, we still have these simplistic lyrics. This is going to be all throughout the album, something we didn't talk about in thematic elements, but that's absolutely true, where lyrics are going to be very, very simple. It is certainly true here. Now, I saw a take on Genius, the website, which I thought was actually really interesting, where they said this was a take on dance crazes like The Twist, but for fundamentalist Christians. And I had to think about that because, yeah, in a way, if you look at these lyrics, you have your left hand, you have your right hand, the left hand's doing this, the right hand's doing that, and then get into the submission position and take your orders.
Right.
Yeah, actually.
I mean, it also definitely can just be seen as yet another, because this is such a sexually charged album, right?
Yes.
And very obviously, okay, relax and assume the position, go into doggy submission. It's also just about fucking and getting fucked on a very literal level. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess I can buy that because it does say, yeah, you got praying hands, they pray for no man. You are allowing yourself to serve as a puppet for the church. I guess. I don't know. To me, this is not one of the stronger. I do like the actual riff is really cool, but the song, unlike a lot of the other ones on this album, it just kind of like sits there a bit.
Yeah, I actually have to agree with that because when they play the song live, Mothersbaugh jumps into the audience on this one, and I think it's actually a strategic move because there isn't much here musically to grab as just as much as the first two songs. Like those are absolute standouts, dynamicism off the charts. Where the low moments on this album are going to be are with tracks like this where they don't grab as much. The melodies aren't there as heavily as they are in the first two tracks or as recognizable like with Satisfaction. So he has to jump into the audience and, he asks them, what's your right hand doing? And, in some cases you get a cohesive answer from the audience. In other cases you just get screams or loud noises.
Well, and this is the sort of thing too that I definitely can see playing a lot better in a live context. You do this at a concert and yeah, there's footage of this obviously from old concerts concerts where they are putting up their right hand, putting up their left hand. They can get the crowd to do it. There's something participatory about it. And to the point of them being sort of an art and performance project, first and foremost, before even actual musicians, I do think there's something about this as a piece of, I don't know, interactive, participatory, whatever you want to call it. The problem is that doesn't stand up very well in a strict record format.
I would agree with that. And also, you kind of have to be careful as to how your audience participates, because I've found live versions of this track where Mothersbaugh raises the hands in, I don't know, what are we calling it now? Are we calling it a Roman salute? Is that what?
We're calling it throwing your heart out to the audience.
Oh, throwing your heart out to the audience. He certainly did that.
In that might be a piece of it too. I mean, like that he is talking about, you know, this is fascistic. I'm sure that is an underlying piece of it as well, given what de-evolution is. But as with anything, if you're not clear about what it is that you're actually doing, it's very easy to get it twisted.
Get it twisted and then turn it into a message that is certainly against what the original intention was, for sure.
Generally speaking, if you don't fully know what a song is trying to do and it's Devo, you can assume that it's something about how there is something about authority that saps individualism out of people and leads them down the path to de-evolution.
Great way to phrase it. Yep, for sure. I want to make one more note before we move on, and that is Alan Myers. I love him on this album. This is one of those songs where I think he is spot on perfect. Absolutely love his performance here.
It's really good.
Roll over, play dead. Get spiritual minded. Okay, relax. And assume the position. Going to lobby submission. Wash your hands 3 times a day. Always do what your mama can say. Worship keep the fall away. Wash your hands 3 times a day.
Satisfaction also. I mean, we talked about the way that it comes in there, but holy cow, most drummers can't do that.
Amazing. Yes, right. Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm going to possibly shock you here, because with the next track, we're on track 4, Space Junk. I actually think this is the lowest point of the album.
Okay.
For me, it has to do with the fact that we have a major chord. You get too much of a good thing. It's just stale after a while. And it's a 1-6-4 chord progression. It's 1-1-6-4 more specifically, which is, you know, punk rock. And so certainly things are familiar. It just kind of repeats, even when we're in this middle section where there is really no instrumentation except for these, you know, 6-4 breaks back to the 1. It just doesn't change. And so there's not really much here. And lyrically, this is kind of the case too, but I want to get your impression of this first and see what do you think from here?
I don't have strong feelings about Space Junk one way or the other. Generally speaking, if I'm just kind of going through the album and I want to listen to the songs that I like, I usually skip this one, which I guess should tell you quite a bit. I don't think it's a bad song, but I'm thinking about, like, compared to Praying Hands, where it's like I can of course remember the you put your right hand, and it's like there's nothing like that stands out in that same way.
Yeah, for sure. This is Jerry Casale who's doing the vocals on this, and I do appreciate that when we get into that middle part where things break down, his enunciation of some of these places is rather humorous.
Mm-hmm. I think lyrically what's going on here is kind of interesting because it is about this just post-space age paranoia, right? Where, like, we sent everything up and now everything is starting to come down, which again just extends the whole point about de-evolution. While we went to space, we sent up satellites, we put a man on the moon, blah, 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 blah. But what happens after you've done that? We weren't able to go further. The only thing that can happen is that we get fucking annihilated by space junk that is falling from the sky.
And how prophetic, right? Because this is 1977 when this was recorded. It is 2025 now. We have thrown so much junk into space. We have, like Starlink satellites and all sorts of other satellites now circling the planet. I think more than ever, this is a concern for sure. But credit to them for it. I just think musically, not much going on there otherwise.
Yeah. So the next song on this album is a product of its time. Shall we say? And there's really like no delicate way to put this, but we're going to be talking about a song called Mongoloid.
Written by Gerald Casale, and exclusively, by the way, though he does sing it with Bob Mothersbaugh on the track. Before we get into it, I do want to introduce where this title comes from, some of the problematic aspects, and then I kind of want to refute some of that as well. So Mongoloids, for those of you who don't know, the term is generally used to describe people who have Down syndrome.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up on Google here, and I'm seeing noun, and then there's a big thing next to it with an exclamation point that says offensive.
Yeah, I mean, for a long time, that was the case. I can't say I've heard that term used ever nowadays.
No, but it's like an old-timey, I guess you could say, slur for people with Down syndrome.
For sure. And, the thing is, I think it is reasonable to assume that this song is specifically talking about people with Down syndrome because it was slang at the time. And also, specifically in the lyrics, we have one chromosome too many,
right?
Which is exactly what Down syndrome is. And I think this is reasonable. However, I actually believe this is not to be the case. Why at this point in the album are we now getting really specific about terms and how they're used? There's this lyric here, and he wore a hat and he had a job and he brought home the bacon so that no one knew. If no one knew, can you really say that this is like about a person with a physical ailment like Down syndrome? It just, for me, it doesn't ring. There's something weird about that.
Well, I think what this song is trying to do is it's trying to point at bigotry and its consequences. It is saying you are so quick to look at a person and judge them for whatever they are, but just like you, the person who you judge for one reason or another is just another person. And by slapping this label on them, this really offensive label, you are dehumanizing them in a way that is just really, really awful.
Yeah, and not to mention that if we claim to value the intelligence of people like that, where we can so quickly label a person as being dumb or stupid, how come some of the most successful and popular people out there can do horrible things to other human beings and make really dumb decisions? Also, just prove to not be anywhere near the level of intelligence that people want to have in their figures. So it's a really good expose onto that whole idea because this person is happy, number one, and number two, no one knows that they have this thing.
I also think it's interesting that I think in terms of the musical structure, this is probably the most conventional song on the album.
No chorus though.
True, but I just mean chord progression, really basic, really simple. There's not a lot of fucking around with unconventional polyrhythms or, anything like that.
It's straightforward, yeah.
And I think that is also intentional. Again, going to the idea of de-evolution, it's this very arch idea of you are a lot stupider than you think you are, right? I think that this is partially doing that through the music as well. It's being like, you think you're so smart. If we really fucking dumb this down for you musically, and then we present this narrative of what intelligence is, then will you get that you're not actually better than anybody else, you stupid motherfucker? Like, I think that's a big piece of what they're trying to do here as well. I'm not convinced that it succeeds on all of this. I think that the problem with bringing in such loaded terminology is that, as I think we've been mentioning already, you need to be specific then with how you use it. And I think that there is a lack of specificity here that allows you to potentially take it in another direction. There's another direction that you can read it too, which I think is also condescending in its way, to be like, oh, well, people with special needs, they're just little guys, They just have their happy little lives and they're just happy little guys. And I actually do think that lyrically you can take this song and come away with that reading. I don't know what was intended, but that is also, if that is what they are trying to say here, that like you just got to leave these poor little guys alone because they're such little guys and they just want to be simple and happy, then that's just sort of creating like the noble savage and that is a problem in its way as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And actually, not too far off from what I've seen them say about the song's moral, although I will say that what they've said about it is pretty close to how I've described it, where it's more so questioning society's value of intelligence. But at the same time, I agree with you where the lyrics aren't addressing that as head on as they could.
Right.
And the only reason why I think that there is a reason to prompt people to think about that is the idea that no one knew, right? That whole lyric that no one knows. It also changes the way that they see things. This thing that they have, it changes what they can see. I think those two things are what should make people question these lyrics and come to their own conclusions about this kind of thing. But I do agree with you where that's so easy to overlook, especially when it's so simplistic in terms of like the structure. The song's great. Don't get me wrong. I actually really like it musically.
It's super catchy, yeah.
But yeah, I will agree. Lyrically, I do think that there's some gaps here and there where there could have been some specificity for sure. Track 6, Jocko Homo. Josh, this is my favorite track on the album.
I fucking love Jocko Homo. It's so good.
Love this song. I love this song. I love its purpose. I love why it's here. We'll talk about, maybe at the end, we'll talk about track listing and where this is.
You know what? Sorry. Now I'm really thinking about it. I might like this song more than Uncontrollable Urge. I'm not, like, it kind of depends. Okay, so for like regular listening, right? Uncontrollable Urge is a lot more accessible. And so I will come back to it, I think, more regularly when I just am feeling in like a neurotic mood. But when I need to just really, I don't know, feel something, this is so, there's something so fucking cathartic about this song. Uncontrollable Urge is all about having a pent up urge that you can't do anything with, whereas Jocko Homo is about releasing that urge, I think.
Totally agree with that. It is a release of an urge. It's also, I say it's a song about solidarity. The idea here is that we've got, first of all, we've got this call and response at the end with that ending march. There's a lot of attempts here to connect with an audience that I think is really interesting. Although, we start off with a descending melody, which I think is very fitting. That whole de-evolution, we're going to descend into the music.
And again, one of many songs on this album with just an instantly unforgettable guitar riff that just grabs you by the collar and is like, fucking listen to me.
Yep, for sure. It grabs attention. We are on the nose with the lyrics here. Just in verse 1, they tell us that we lost our tails, evolving up from little snails. I say it's all just wind in sails.
That's right. It's de-evolution, baby. Things are not getting better. They are getting worse every day.
You could have taken that song from Pearl Jam. Was it It's Revolution, Baby, and turned into It's De-Evolution, Baby? That's exactly what we're looking at here.
Or Beatles. So you say you want de-evolution?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's interesting how you could really take anything that talks about revolution and throw in de-evolution into it, and you can get a really interesting context out of that.
Well, and I think that is because when you talk about revolution in the context of most popular music from around and before this time, Beatles' Revolution being a great fucking example, that's actually a counter-revolutionary anthem. If you listen to what they are saying, you think you're so you think you're going to change the world? Well, changing the world is actually stupid, and you can't do it. And I think that what Devo is doing with de-evolution is it's just making it into a motto that you can really stand behind, a way of living where it's like, oh, you're going to condescend to me. You're going to call me stupid and an idiot. Well, guess what? I'm going to get even stupider.
Yeah. And it's inevitable. It's going to happen. Right. There's no way to change course on this, essentially. It's sort of a nihilistic view in a way of this. Part of how they pull this off is by using the term pinheads, just like with Mongoloid, disclaimer here too about the use of pinhead. It does have its roots in troubling material. Actually, a lot of people make this incorrect assumption that their use of the term pinhead came from the Ramones because there's a song called Pinhead that they put out a year prior to the recording of this album, I believe, or more than a year before. And that's actually just inaccurate because you can listen to live versions of this track from 1975. They did a live broadcast on WHK radio in Cleveland, Ohio. It's apparently that's where they debuted Jocko Homo. It's this Halloween concert, which is known for probably the most antagonistic relationship between band and audience, where Mark Mothersbaugh jumps into the crowd, does this whole, are we not men? And nobody in the crowd is following after him. People are calling him fucking asshole.
That's so good.
People are walking out. There's fights that are breaking in the audience.
We are DEVO. We are DEVO. You're not even. Are we not men? Assholes. Are we not men? We are DEVO. Is he not a man?
Yeah, you can listen to that live. I'll put the link in the show notes for that. But I also want to zero in on the term pinhead as well, because it does have its roots with microcephaly, which is a medical condition, which is referring to a person with a smaller than normal head. Right. This can occur for a number of reasons. The Zika virus in 2015 was, I think, the most recent resurgence of this term. And the CDC, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, has estimates that 1 in every 1,150 babies has it in some form. And so, yeah, variety of causes for this thing. I actually know about it because it was featured in Todd Browning's 1932 film Freaks, which it's like, if you went to art school, this was a rite of passage. Basically, everybody had to watch this movie because it's, one of those early films. Being about a freak show, obviously you have the pinhead characters. They have a pretty sizable role in this movie. That, I think, could have been an influence. But I think, really, who cares? The reason why they use the term pinhead doesn't really matter too much. I think more so, it's Devo's way of connecting the audience together as a whole and saying, we are all this, we are all weird, we are all different. And him going out to the audience and having them scream, "We are Devo," is that rallying cry to get people to act as a cohesive whole.
I still don't know how I feel about the concept of de-evolution overall. Like, I certainly think that it is reductive, I guess. It's a very boomer thing, like a very late boomer thing to be like, well, it turns out that actually we're just stupid. Because I think that there is a very fine line between accepting the ways in which our structures in our society are making us stupid, which is a very real thing, and basically giving into cynicism. It is a very, very fine line. And I think that you can either use this as a call to action, and you can be like, alongside my fellow devolved people, have the potential to make a better world, or you can say, everything's shit and I'm going to sit this one out.
It's sort of like the whole banishing of the Dunning-Kruger effect. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Where it's like, there's no point in separating yourself from others, thinking that you're the smartest of a particular topic when go on Reddit, okay? There will always be someone who knows something more about a particular thing than you do. It's just a fact of life. It's just better to accept the fact that we can be dumb about everything, not perfectly. Like there's no such thing as objectivity, right? Is a philosophy that you see touted around. Even in the sciences, you have to accept that there's no such thing as always knowing something. And I think that de-evolution, to me, that's where it sells itself.
Yeah, for sure. I also think, though, that where we find ourselves right now, we as a society, it feels like we're sort of at an inflection point between all of the advances that have been brought about by the internet, by the information age, where one can theoretically get access to just about anything, and most of that information can be vetted in a meaningful way, versus sort of the slop hell that seems to be in our immediate future with large language models, which in a lot of ways feels like continued de-evolution, where rather than being able to access something that is maybe not objective truth, but at least has some sources and citations that you can then follow to get additional information, you just get this stream of convincing sounding bullshit that is non-falsifiable. I think that there is the real possibility for that to bring about the absolute collapse of anything resembling a shared reality. And that scares the bejesus out of me. And so I think that depending on which way you take this credo, you can either be like, we're all dumbasses, but we're the kind of dumbasses who have an interest in trying to make the world better and see what problems we can actually solve, which requires fighting against that kind of thing, like LLMs and everything that the global capitalist whatever, would want us to buy into. Or you can give yourself over to that and say, well, I'm comfortable with my level of stupidity. If other people also want to get stupid, that's on them, not on me. And I just think that's a really reductive and cynical way to see the world, And I don't think that's fully what Devo necessarily advocate for. In fact, I think their ideology is not particularly cohesive. But I do think that when you start to talk about these ideas, it naturally leads you toward these other directions and other ways of thinking about the way that the future is going to be.
Yeah, and I think the song actually shows where that ambiguity is troublesome, because they're not being very specific about anything, but at the same time, they're trying to take this high concept, put it in a low art form just meaning popular music, essentially. And this is the downside of that. This track, it's like an entry point, but it really doesn't expand upon anything to get more of a a sense of what really is involved in that. And I think we both really have expanded on the many different directions that this could be taken. So I definitely think that's a really interesting point.
But those are our original thoughts. I think we're probably finding a lot in there that isn't actually in there because it can be such a useful jumping off point.
100%, for sure. Especially if people take this music seriously and really engage with it the way that I think the band wants you to. Certainly Jerry would want you to, for sure.
Yes.
On that note, though, I am going to go into some of the meta stuff about this track. I went through rabbit hole after rabbit hole after rabbit hole on this because there's so much that they bring up and they're pulling inspirations from everywhere. And this is really the mission statement for Devo.
Yeah, this song is the de-evolution manifesto.
Yes, exactly. And so we should pick apart these things to see where these sources come from because there's some really interesting stuff that they pull as influences that, I don't think it's part of their overall message. Shortly after Sextet Devo does their performance at the Kent State Arts Festival in 1973, Mother's Baugh, Mark, he's out and around doing his art thing, going to flea markets looking for old art and just random stuff, and he finds this pamphlet, Jocko Homo Heavenbound.
Have you actually read Jocko Homo Heavenbound?
I tried.
It is so funny. It's just I mean, your mileage may vary depending on how much you like crank shit, but I love crank shit.
Yep. Yeah, this is the definition of crank. And I tried. I really did try to go through this. I just couldn't get past like even page 2.
Can I read something from here?
Please do.
Okay, well, here's the kinds of questions that Bertram Henry Shattuck, PhD, is looking to get answers for. If you have an open mind or a willingness to expose the fallacy of this book, here are 7 little questions for beginners. 1. If it were conceded that there were man-like animals before Adam and animal-like men after the fall, crossbreeding and corruption of the race described in Genesis, how could that disprove that God made an image man without proxy and forthwith? So already that's nonsense. That doesn't make any that's actual nonsense. Here's question number 2. Does evolution continue to function so that we may someday develop horns, hooves, shell, wings, gizzard, wheels, or smokestack?
That's not how that works. What?
That's a great. I think it's a good question. Question number 3. Ought it to continue so that the strong may crush the weak?
Oh, that's biblical.
Question number 4. Among Earth's teeming billions, is any creature developing a wart, wen, wrinkle, blister, freckle, or pimple into an organ or limb?
Okay, I mean, maybe what?
Well, you can't answer the question? Okay, I guess you don't understand as much as this guy does. 5. Why is it that 99.9999999% of life continues in one cell form in defiance of evolution? 6. What law would put a tail on a gobbler's nose and a whisk broom on his breast? Number 7. What law would handicap destructive creatures as does poison itch in the bite of blood-sucking insects, parenthetical, provoking destruction, end parenthetical, or the 17 years of helpless infancy for quote-unquote locusts?
I have been spending the past minute staring at the walls and trying to contemplate my place in this universe.
This shit rules.
Incredible. Incredible.
I can see why Mark found this so incredibly compelling. It is, I mean, again, it's standard issue crank shit, but it's so specific. Like this is one guy who has it all figured out.
Yep, no kidding. In fact, why don't we take it to an interview of Jerry Casale where he actually talks a little bit about this pamphlet in full detail.
Jocko Homo, heaven-bound king of the apes. And of course, it was basically a right-wing evangelical religious propaganda that says man is not the highest form at all of animals in the animal kingdom. He's the only one that is against nature. He's the only one that fights nature. He's the only one that has to suppress nature in order to be dominant over it. He can't fit in with it. And there was a stairway to heaven, and the stairs were ingrained with usury, adultery, alcoholism, and as the sins got worse, there was a monkey angel at the top ready to embrace you when you stepped up to heaven.
And then at the end, there's a picture of a devil that says de-evolution on his chest. And I'm like, that's us.
It was clear. That was it. De-evolution became the term that we hung everything on. it became the defining point of our little hipster epistemology.
God, Jerry is so fucking annoying. I say that as a big fan. Because also, this is just a little bugbear of mine. We talk a lot about evangelical Christianity on our show and the many ways in which evangelical Christianity is like firmly anti-intellectual. Jocko Homo Heavenbound is not an evangelical Christian tract. It is something written by a guy who has something genuinely wrong with his brain. On the surface, maybe it appears to be something that's evangelical Christian in a meaningful way, but it is something much, much stranger.
I think that's a perfect transition into the next piece of the song that I want to talk about, which comes from a book called The Beginning Was the End. And the reason why this has anything to do with this track Jocko Homo is because originally Jocko Homo was included in a short film directed by Chuck Statler that was called In the Beginning Was the End, The Truth About De-Evolution. And so where does this come from? What is this book that we're talking about? Well, it's written by this guy. It's Oscar Kiss Meyerth, apparently, or Mayerth, however you pronounce that last name. Well, allegedly this guy is either a Nazi or a Nazi sympathizer that escaped to South America. It's not proven, but from the writing, it's pretty easy to conclude that this guy was at least a supporter of eugenics. The way that Devo heard about it, they found it in a Time magazine review that was published a couple months after the 1974 Kent State Performing Arts Festival, which they also performed at. And this book was apparently becoming notorious in Europe. Josh, you mentioned loving crank literature. This is yet again another piece of crank literature.
Coming from a slightly different perspective, though, it sounds like.
Yes, for sure, because whereas...
a more racist perspective.
For sure. Whereas Jocko Homo Heavenbound approached the concept of de-evolution from a religious context, this book theorized that, and I'm quoting this from the cover, how man came into being through cannibalism. Intelligence can be eaten. Fascinating.
Uh-oh.
A little bit. Now, we're not going to go into any detail about this. However, I will recommend another YouTube channel. They're called Book Club from Hell. They go over this book for, I think, 3 hours. And they ripped this thing to shreds. I will put the link in the show notes. You're welcome to check it out. I found it quite humorous. If you've got 3 hours of a monotonous process, this will be a really interesting background. 2 Australian guys, really humorous. Go ahead and check that out. One other thing that I want to bring up is the "Are we not men?" question and where this came up. Where did this chant come from? I think we can both agree that this is like the highlight of the song.
Absolutely.
This ending march, it's so invigorating, even though I don't know what to do with the energy that it's giving me.
Yeah, it is. It's militaristic. It makes you feel like you can fucking march through a wall after you hear this thing.
This line, it comes from The Island of Dr. Moreau, which is a book by H.G. Wells. However, it wasn't in Devo's attention, or at least in Jerry Casale's and Mark Mothersbaugh's attention, until The Island of Lost Souls, a film from 1932, would be played during late night TV when both of them were in their teen years. There is the law, quote unquote, the law, that is regularly recited to the, quote, beast folk to keep them under Dr. Moreau's control.
What is the law?
Not to run on all fours. That is the law. Are we not men?
What is the law?
Not to eat meat. That is the law. Are we not men?
We are Devo.
Once again, we are taking something that is crank science. We're not taking this seriously, but it feeds into our band's ethos.
Well, there's always this ironic thing with Devo, too, and especially with Jerry. You can never tell how serious he is. And when it's at its most enjoyable, then it's fun. But sometimes you're like, man, I don't know. I don't know, man.
You bring up an amazing point there, because part of my researching for this was reading a book, Are We Not Men? We Are Devo, by Jade Dellinger and David Giffels. Essentially a retelling of the band's history. And in there, the authors admit that you kind of can't really take what they say for granted, like as truth necessarily.
At face value, yeah, no.
They'll throw in parts of history that might not exactly be correct.
Yeah, it's hard to know how much of it is them consciously fucking with you versus like just just not remembering things for themselves. They don't particularly care how reliable of narrators they are. That's part of the project.
And that's what I think actually is really fascinating about this group, because they're sort of enduring de-evolution themselves. And it's that humbling nature, right? That's, like I was saying, the rejection of the Dunning-Kruger effect, where it's like you just accept that you don't know anything and that the truth changes. And that I was watching a short on YouTube, Rick Beato, his channel. He was interviewing Densmore and Krieger from The Doors. And he was talking about a scene that shows up in the Doors movie of, I think, how they wrote Light My Fire, how that came about. Densmore, I believe, is the guy who's like,
is any of that true?
Yeah, just like that.
Almost just like that.
Almost.
There was a few.
I do a Latin thing. Ray'd say, hey, wait a minute, take a break. I've got this intro.
No, that's not true, John.
Okay. Well, that's my remembrance.
That's because you saw the movies.
This is what I want to hear. That's good.
No,
I mean, that's how memory works, right? Like that earlier story about how Mick Jagger responded to Satisfaction, that could also be complete bullshit.
We'll have to take their word for it on a lot of what we bring up historically. We'll put it that way. I do have one more thing I want to share about the song, and that is this Vice article written in 2018 by Jerry Casale. It's titled, "We Are Drowning in a Devolved World, an Open Letter from Devo." He wrote this after being entered into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Let's just say he had some thoughts. And so he really gets into it here about the ethos of the band and his more modern interpretation and thoughts about what their goal is. And so I will put that in the show notes. Feel free to take a look at it. It's rather interesting and certainly written kind of like a manifesto, I would say. So if you want to see a more recent take on what Devo is all about, that's the way to do it. But yeah, that's everything I have on Jocko Homo. I will say that as a definitive statement on the band, it's shocking. It's actually really shocking to go from Whip It to this.
Yeah, especially if you only know them for Whip It, which most people do, right? Like the vast majority of people, if they know who Devo is, it's because they're the guys who made Whip It. That song is very easy to write off, I think. This song is not. This song is going to make you have an opinion on it. You are going to either be like, what the fuck is this? I hate it. Or you're going to have maybe a more measured response, or it's going to just sing to the core of who you are. But the one thing that I think you fundamentally cannot do is ignore it. And that's why I love it so much.
After listening to the song, this is going to paint how I view Devo from this point on. There's no going back after this, for sure. Right, we are going to take a quick intermission. We're going to do something fun, and Josh, I did not warn you that we were going to be doing this, but I think you're going to find this fun.
Okay.
First, before we get into this, I just want to remind people, please like the video, please subscribe if you're enjoying this.
You gotta. Because
we're having a lot of fun talking about this album already.
If you're having fun, you gotta smash that subscribe button, folks. Do it.
There's a bell in there. Hit the bell.
Don't forget.
Because the rarity at which I post videos on this channel, you need to be notified when I post something. All right, we're going to go to an intermission here. We're going to have a little bit of fun. I do want to give proper credit to Boogie Boys Basement and Alex Brunel specifically. I have so much to thank him for. He was a great resource for a lot of stuff early Devo, and he happens to have the stems of the 2008 recording of Uncontrollable Urge.
Oh, cool.
All right, here we go with guitars. It's so surfer guitar. I can't get over that. We've got a 2-guitar attack.
Oh, it's so good.
Check out the drums. Very Tom heavy. Let's go to Mark's vocal.
Yeah.
And of course, Mark is going nuts as usual.
Got a news, got a surge, and it's out of control. Got a nudge, I wanna purge, cause I'm losing control. Uncontrollable urge, I wanna tell you all about it.
It's so crazy that he still sounds like this. His voice has just stayed the same. So rare.
2008. Here's the backing vocals. Almost like a chant.
Mm-hmm.
Even in the lyrics that I see on Genius, they say 999. A little bit of synth noise here.
Oh, that's so good.
Yep. And this is also playing in the background here.
Okay, yeah.
So here's Jerry.
Oh, I love that little... The little pick there. It's wonderful. so much of what makes this song work is how propulsive the bass is.
Yes. Yeah, we haven't talked much about Jerry Casale's bass, and it's essential.
It is.
And we're going to end the song with some of the back and forth we hear at the end.
Got an uncontrollable urge I wanna tell you all about. An uncontrollable urge that makes me scream and shout. And I say, yeah. He says, yeah. And I say, yeah, yeah. He says, yeah, yeah. And I say, yeah. Yeah. And I say, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. And I say, yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Those were the stems for Uncontrollable Urge. That was from the Rock Band recording in 2008.
Oh, Rock Band, the video game. Right. Yes.
So thank you again to Boogie Boys Basement for that. Super appreciate having that available. I will also make sure to link them in the show notes. And yeah, that was a little bit of fun before we get into track 7, Too Much Paranoias.
Too much paranoias.
Yeah. We're fitting within the ethos of the band. It is certainly a way to title a song. To further the lack of, I don't want to say lack of intellect, it's sort of like really reducing it down a bit too much. But I mean, come on. There's a lyric in here about a Big Mac, but then in the chorus, hold the pickles, hold the lettuce, special orders don't upset us. All we ask is that you let us serve it your way. Mm-hmm. Josh, that is from a Burger King commercial.
Sure is.
So, I mean, we are going to be talking about capitalism because of the song, and capitalism is confusing to people. And I think this certainly is proving the point because they mix up the slogans. It's fantastic.
Yeah, which, I mean, I'm sure that's an intentional choice. You know, it's talking about the way I think that all of these different pieces of what is fed to you, very literally, how all of these pieces just get mixed up because you're constantly chewing on them, right? It's just shoving it down your throat. You don't even have the chance to chew, actually. It just gets shoved down your throat wholesale.
And you know what I think really also sells it too? It's the paranoia that you get. And I'm going to try and phrase this as succinctly as I can. It's the paranoia that you get when everyone is trying to cater to you, when everyone is trying to grab your attention and do things for you. They are trying their best to make your life better. That manifests into a paranoia that you cannot escape because everything in marketing is trying to get you to engage with them.
Well, and this is actually, I think, the theme and the feeling of this song, if you like this one, Oh No, It's Devo is this for the whole album.
Ooh.
Both in terms of the feel of the song and I think what it's doing, what it's commenting on, which is, you're talking about going into sort of the Reagan years where America is the best it's ever been and we're almost reaching the end of history. And what does it feel like when everything caters to you and everything fucking sucks?
I'll actually relate to that with this piece from that 2018 Vice article that I mentioned earlier. This is from Casale. We witnessed an America where the capacity for critical thought and reasoning were eroding fast. People mindlessly repeating slogans from political propaganda and ad campaigns such as America, love it or leave it, don't ask why, drink Bud Dry, you've come a long way, baby, semicolon. Even risk-free, feel-good slogans like give peace a chance.
Well, and this is so important too, because this is the American response to Soviet realism, where everything in the Soviet world was about how you can contribute to the motherland and how political society sort of brings us all together under communism. With America, it's all about how you specifically, yes, you're the best. Don't forget it. And the reason that you're the best is that you buy shit. And because you buy shit, that's what keeps us afloat. It actually obliterates the individual far more than Soviet communism does, in my opinion. But it gives you the illusion that you are the master of your domain, that you control everything within your life. And the way that it does that, of course, is it makes you subservient to these brands. It's a concept of a thing. It doesn't even fully encapsulate a real thing or a real item. It just gestures toward a brand. And by making yourself subservient to that brand, to that image, you no longer have real agency.
And this is all on top of these special effects, the angular guitars, another great performance from Myers on the drums on this, Mother's Baugh, incredible guitar work here. It's an interesting message paired with the most appropriate musical response.
Oh, yes, 'cause after that it's serving your world. It's too much, baby. My love's a great trouble with this man.
I mean, the way that it feels to me is what it feels like when you are driving down any road anywhere in the United States at like midnight or 1 a.m. And there's nothing going on anymore except that you are seeing fast food signs still lit up because that's the only stuff that is actually open anymore.
Throw up that meme with all like the corporate logos and the, right? I can't remember where it was from.
Yeah,
I think a place in
it's in Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
Breezewood, I want to say.
Yes, yes, I think so.
Because it's that, right? This is the best. This is the best that you can get from America, where you have 30 options available. All of them are processed to hell and back. All of them suck, but at least they're going to only cost you between $6 to $8. You know?
A very fitting way to follow up Jocko Homo as well, I feel like, where like not only did we set up the idea that everybody is devolving, that we're sort of like, you know, we've gone out of Mongoloid where intelligence doesn't mean what we think it means, or its importance doesn't hold what we think it holds in society. We then are showing everybody that we're a lot dumber than we think we are and that we're going to continue down this path. And here we are now showing the cause of where this thought process is coming from.
And
it's
what it feels
it's a concept
like,
album.
Yeah, and
this is a concept album, Josh.
What it feels like musically is that you are having a panic attack. Like it especially the first time you listen to it, it's almost amelodic, but it's not. It actually is very tightly structured. But the way that it makes you feel is like, oh God, what is going on? Because that is the way that things feel when you are separated from what it is that you really want and you're presented with a simulacrum of what it is that you want. That's why it's, you know, all we ask is that you let us serve it your way. It's not really the way that you want it to be. It's the way that they force it to be for you. It's not your way. It's their conception of what your way is.
Yeah, and you know what really scares me about that? Is that this song, it has the appearance of being dissonant, but it's actually really not that dissonant, right? It really sells the concept that it's like, we're not far off. This isn't science fiction. This is actually really based in reality.
And it's only 1:57 long. And again, that's intentional. It's a short, sharp shock that really, really sticks in your craw.
You know, one of my favorite things about doing this podcast is that we generally take longer to discuss the songs that last only a couple minutes.
This album is only 35 minutes long.
Yep, exactly. But there's so much you could say about it. I mean, that's actually what I think works when we talk about simplistic lyrics and a very cohesive concept, even though there are a lot of gaps in thinking that can lead to conclusions, like you were saying about with the Kent State Massacre, how people were treating that and going different ways with it. You know, when there isn't like this popular narrative that people can latch onto and you go your separate ways, this album kind of falls into that same pitfall. But I mean, it just leads to so many different types of conversations you could have about all these lyrics.
But I think the absence of a central narrative, that's a feature. That's a feature of the way that the U.S. government handled the Kent State Massacre. One option would have been to go out there and really have the government fucking like prostrate itself and be like, we fucked up. This was bad. What we did was fundamentally bad, and we are going to make sure that nothing like this ever happens again. But of course they didn't do that. You know, nor did they double down and be like, this is awesome and we fucking nailed it. But if you were to do too much one way or the other, it would give you something to either stand for or against. And I feel like this is the thing about the moment that we live in right now as well. Because there is no real, I mean, you want to talk about like what's going on right now with the federal government and tens or maybe even hundreds of thousands of people just being summarily laid off. Yes, there is, I guess, a message from the government being like, we need to do this in order to, I don't know, right size the thing or whatever. There's no meaningful counter message that's being propagated by the supposed opposition. And that's because to present that kind of a counter narrative would ultimately go against what it is that we all, and by we, I mean the people who control the government, want, which is to say they want to cut costs. They want to lay these people off. They want things to change. They just don't want to have the blood on their hands. And so that is why they are allowing this all to happen. It's perfectly to their benefit, and it benefits really everybody in terms of like they have something that they can run against in another couple of years, but they're not going to take concrete action to stop it.
100%. And if they do, it what was Schumer's incredibly dumb catchphrase that he tried to make popular in front of that crowd.
Oh God, I don't even remember.
Horrible. Like that's
I
their
don't
response.
remember, and that's the thing. The fact that I don't remember should tell you everything you need to know.
That's exactly the point. Yep, for sure. So we are going to, I would say, get away from this message when we get into track 8, which is Gut Feeling and Slap Your Mammy. The level of abstraction that you get from pop music is, I think, necessary when things become too heady. I think it actually helps to kind of calm us down from that antagonism and from the paranoia of that previous track. And so what I'm talking about specifically, when we get into the beginning of the song, it is 4/4. There is nothing odd about this tempo at all. Myers is playing it straightforward. We've got everybody contributing to their part in the song. But what is really striking me about this, whereas with a typical pop song, you have 4 phrases in a stanza. Here you've got 5. And the reason why it works, the reason why they play it for a while, is because that progression is so well done.
Yeah, it's simple. I mean, the chords themselves, it's just E, G, C, A, D.
Very, very simple. And it just works so well. If you were to do a 5-phrase stanza, this is a great way to do it. No one would be any the wiser unless you had time to identify it, which they do by letting it play for a while. I thought that was really, really, really smart. It's not the only place where you see this either, but there's very limited examples I could find of this. I was looking really hard to find songs that did this. Not like the Beatles, I Want You, She's So Heavy. That's like the most prominent example, but that is done with these very heavy chords and very distorted guitar, so they are really trying to hammer it home. They deliver that it's odd. Whereas another song like The Strokes' Trying Your Luck, I think is a better example of 5 phrases in a stanza because it doesn't have as long an intro as this song does, but it's the same idea where they can play something with 5 rather than 4 and you just treat it like it's normal.
Yeah, it's as is often the case with Devo, it feels a lot simpler than it really is.
Yeah, exactly. I just want to spotlight that here because they make it a point. You know, it's not me making it a point. It's them making it a point because they let it play for so long. Now, the thing is, once we get over that, we start getting into the lyrics. It's a little bit more personal. I'll just pick out the lyric that I like in the song, which is, I looked for silver linings, but you're rotten to the core.
Yeah, I similarly like the very first lyric, which is something about the way you taste makes me want to clear my throat.
Yeah.
That's so visceral.
It's so bitter. Literally.
I mean, it could be bitter. It could be rotten. It could be a lot of different things. But it is how it can feel when you've been in a situation that you no longer want to be in, but you're not entirely sure how to extricate yourself yet.
And it's very poetic because in the lines that I bring up, silver linings, the sound of the I, very high tones. The next line, rotten to the core. Oh, very low sound. It's poetry.
And that intro it's like 2 minutes, right? Like it's 2 minutes of instrumental up until you get to that beginning. And this is out of a 5-minute long song. And the Slap Your Mammy part is that part starts around like the 3.5-ish minute mark, I want to say. So you're only really getting about 1.5 minutes of this love song that isn't a love song.
Yeah, for sure. And the thing too, the scream. Oh my God, Mark Mothersbaugh's scream. I forgot to mention that in the previous track of Too Much Paranoias. His scream is terrifying.
Yeah.
And you get it twice on this album.
I mean, I think that's part of why I like Devo so much, and this album especially. I would describe myself as a neurotic individual, and it's hard sometimes to find music that really feels the way that I feel. There's something about the way that this captures the full range, like all the different ways that you can feel neurotic, you know?
Yeah. Does that lead into that ending part of the song with Slap Your Mammy where it's just like an ode to masturbation, I guess?
Sometimes you got to jork it. I don't know. Maybe.
Is that a prescription, right? Like it's like, you know, when you're at your worst, just stroke it out.
I don't know how to make it go away is the thing. For me personally, I genuinely don't know how to make it go away. But sometimes you can find things that will at least push it to the back of your mind. And there is this release, right, that I think was hinted at in Uncontrollable Urge and then made more explicit in Satisfaction. This is paying off a beat from earlier in the album, from the very beginning of the album.
For sure. Yep, absolutely. And being very direct about it. I mean, I don't think you could argue that this song is about, or this part of the song is about anything else.
I mean, it is also, I think, you know, Mammy, Pappy. It is also, I think, if you want to be very literal about it, it is to do with your parents and the way that your parents fuck you up, and you want to get back at them for fucking them up in the ways that they fuck you up. But it's, I think, mostly just about masturbation.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, for sure. Well, that's going to bring us over to track 9. Come Back, Johnny. You were saying that Mongoloid was kind of conventional. I actually think that this is the most pop-ready song on this album.
I would agree.
This is quickly approaching as like my second favorite song on the album.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I like it. It does not make my top 3.
Interesting. I think I come from it from a musical perspective, less lyrically. Mm-hmm. I think the lyrics to the song are rather simple storytelling. Nothing really to gain from this besides the story of this guy, Johnny, obviously referencing, or it's just a cute allusion back to Johnny Be Good by Chuck Berry. Very little similarities to both songs besides the name.
I would argue that the chorus at the end has a bit of a Johnny Be Good feel to it.
But that's kind of where the similarities end. Because with this song, Alan Meyer's drum, it's a galloping drum. And related to he hops in his Datsun, he gets up on the speedway, runs headfirst into a semi. It has that like gotta go feel. Actually, just even saying that was kind of a gallop.
Yeah.
It starts very simple. It gets more complex as we get into the next verse. The second verse, not so much, but the third verse, we've got this guitar going off from Bob Mothersbaugh. He's fantastic. No notes on his performance. I think his soloing is so good here. And then we get the background vocals going into the last part of the song, which is almost harrowing because it's eerie, sort of crying going on for Johnny. And it just emotionally sells it to me.
I agree. I think something that is kind of interesting that happens musically is the he made her cry.
Yes.
Where it goes way down.
Yes.
Like much further down than you would expect. And certainly you want to compare it to a song like Johnny Be Good, right? Where with that one, it's
Johnny Be Good.
Go, Johnny, go, Johnny Be Good.
Yeah.
But it's not you made her cry.
Yeah.
It's so much lower. And it is definitely reflecting or maybe even interpolating that descant from Johnny Be Good. But once again, it's in a way that you don't expect. And it sort of clues you into the fact that this is not a temporary we'd love you to come back. It's like, oh no, you're gone.
He's gone.
He's gone.
He's gone. Yep.
And then of course you get the payoff for that on the Johnny jumped into his Datsun, drove out on the expressway, went head on into a semi. It's so every time that you think that they're going to do something that is sort of conventional for the time, they don't. It's like, this is a song about a guy who straight up fucking died.
Yep.
And they are not singing that they would like him to come back and hang out. They're at either a wake or a funeral, and they are mourning him.
And the mourning is so emotional. It's just so sad. The more I listen to it, the more I focus on those backing vocals, because I don't know specifically who's doing the backing vocals on here. Maybe Alex Brunel, if you're listening to this, please let me know from your wisdom if you can tell us who's doing the backing vocals here, because the way that they engineer it's very treble heavy. So I think we try to get like a more feminine sound out of them. And because of that, it sells the concept so heavily here. I would say out of all the tracks, I think I get more of an emotional response from this one than the other ones, and hence I think that's why it's my second favorite, or at least fast approaching that.
Yeah, and it's a fun little irony thing that they're doing too, where it remains so driving and so fast-paced and so fun-sounding right up until you actually listen to what it is that they're saying. I really like that. And also, if you wonder if Devo can still rock, go listen to their Tiny Desk concert from last year.
Yes.
They performed this one, and it is so good.
So incredible. I am absolutely linking it in the show notes of this episode for sure. Please check it out. Excellent performance.
Well, I think to the point of, I don't know, sexual neurosis that has been coursing through this album. Maybe there's no better example of that, actually, than this next one. Sloppy, in parentheses, I saw my baby gettin'. This is a weird one. This is a really weird one. And every time I come back to it, I'm like, I like it, but it's so weird, and then it's just kind of over.
Yeah, it is. God, I love this song so much.
No, it's a good song. It's a good song. It's a weird song. It's a good song.
This is track 10. At this point in the album, we should be veering off. You know, we should be like going down tempo.
Yeah, you think you'd be like, yeah, exactly. Like you'd think Comeback Johnny would be sort of the high, right? The climax. And
of side 2, yes.
And then from here, we'd be kind of slowing back down and finding our way out. That is not what they do.
No. No, it's an adrenaline rush yet again.
And then the album ends also in a way you wouldn't expect with Shrivel Up, which we'll be talking about next. But yeah, no, I think it's a classic thing of, you think you know where we're going from here? Well, guess what? You don't.
You don't. And instead, here's some bugle horn melody type riff that is going to be like the standing point of the song. When they play this live, it is even more enjoyable because they are blistering fast when they play this. Mother's Boss sings almost maniacally, which fits so well with the lyrics. I saw my baby yesterday. She spent her money on a brand new car. It didn't get her very far. And so my baby said to me, she said, sloppy. Okay, wait. So
what did he mean by this?
What does that mean?
What did he mean by this?
And then I think I missed the whole. What?
But it's not just whole. It's whole la, whole la.
Yeah. Yep. So
what?
It was clear. The progression was clear. The only thing I can think of, what I pull from this is she is going to use him for the money. The more she sleeps with him, the more money she gets out of it.
You're saying.
Yeah. Yep.
She's got a sugar daddy.
She's got a sugar daddy. She's going to get the money, but he thinks he missed the whole la.
Who missed the hole?
Yes.
Whose hole was missed? What did he mean by this?
Here you go, Devo once again saying, screw a sufficient narrative. Here, come to your own conclusions.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly evocative. I'm not sure what it's evoking, but there's also something here about the way that the tempo rises and then falls.
Yeah.
Which I think is really interesting.
I do think there is some text painting going on here for sure, because if it's this whole idea of getting into a romp with a sugar daddy and then, the sputtering failure, because you get that guitar distortion in there as well, which is kind of like,
right. I mean, it's premature ejaculation, right? I mean, that's what it feels like to me.
Yeah, he missed the hole.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of ended. And then the tempo picks back up again.
Yeah.
And you get the really driving drum and guitar, and Mark's just yelling hey over and over again.
Actually, so that to me is really fascinating. The fact that he's going hey, which is, we're talking about punk music. This is a punk thing to do. Why are we doing it? What is this doing on this song versus all the other songs where it probably could have had, this could have fit in Jocko Homo to do a chant like that. Mm-hmm. What's it doing here?
I don't know. I don't have an answer for this. I just think it's really interesting.
It's just a fun little addition to the story. And I think there's so much more interesting stuff going on with the way that the music is telling the story, even more so than the lyrics are.
Well, and you mentioned Alan Myers. This song would not be possible without Alan Myers doing he's doing.
Not possible at all.
Because, as I said, the tempo rises and falls, but it's also that they are going into and out of the rhythm, and it is completely reliant on Alan keeping the tempo throughout as that tempo goes up and down, but also providing them a very clear place to come in and out as they are sort of singing the different beats of the song.
Yeah, fantastic way to sum that up. Well then, Josh, we're going to get to track 11, Shrivel Up. We are at the last song of the album. As you said before, it's going to be a very interesting way of ending things.
Yeah, I mean, it's a God-given fact. You can't go back.
You can't go back. It's also rule number 1 that living right isn't fun.
Yeah, I mean, it do be like that, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, why not? I mean, are we advocating for the live fast, die young, leave a good-looking corpse?
I'm also not sure with the buy it by the sack, buy 'em by the sack. I don't know if this is a reference to White Castle burgers, but I like to think that it is because that's like their famous slogan, buy 'em by the sack.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. That's a nice angle to this. Sure.
And I think, I mean, they have White Castle in Ohio. It could also just be like more generally like that you buy things in bulk in America. You gotta, to get that best deal, you gotta do that. And White Castle, I think in many ways is emblematic of American excess. Just think about all of the fast food references that they have, particularly on Too Much Paranoia. It ties in, I think.
Yeah, that's actually something we didn't mention while we were discussing that song, which is these phrases that Mark keeps singing about that sound like products, but there aren't products for these things.
Yeah.
And that absurdism is in the song too, because you got a pooty poo poo, you got a pooty poo poo. What am I doing? What is a pooty poo? What is this?
Yeah, it's like all of these things, I think, are pieces of absurdity. Like, well, it's a God-given law that you're gonna get small. Obviously, you could say, well, it's because when you get old, you start to, shrivel up. Like obviously, yes, on one level, sure, whatever.
Yeah.
But I think it's also intentionally a little absurd. This idea, running out of sap. All of these different ways of talking about what it means to get older. Because that's really what this thing is at its core. You're gonna get older, and eventually you're gonna fucking die.
But also explain to me what it means to die under daddy's cap.
Right.
I would argue that maybe the absurdism probably hits its peak on this particular song.
I think so. Because I do like the idea of like, yeah, that famous thing that everybody knows. You gotta buy 'em by the sack. That famous axiomatic saying that we've all learned since we were young children.
Sure, Mark. Sure, Jerry. Yeah, sure. Yeah, for sure. That thing that I've never heard of before, and you're assuming that I have before. Yeah, why not?
I mean, I have, but that's because I like White Castle so much.
Yes, you're gonna lose your mama, it's a God-given fact. You gotta buy 'em by the sack, gotta buy 'em by the sack. Well, it's a God-given law that you're gonna get small, yes, you're gonna get small.
I guess there's just not really much to say about the track. There's no resolution here in the musicality, at least to my ear, and it just kind of like da 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 da. It's a descending line, which fits very well with the topic of the song, but there's no real tonic, and I don't want to call it atonal, but it kind of gets that vibe.
Well, and there's something about the that guitar. It's almost like the trombone. Wah, wah.
Yeah. Oh,
and
yeah.
I think that's intentional.
Yeah.
I think that they're really trying to be like, oh man, ain't that just a bitch?
Absolutely true. Wow. But as an album closer, though, I mean, I have to hit this home again. What is there to say to have this song ending the album?
It's such a bummer. It's a bummer ending, I think. And I think intentionally so.
I don't know. I get that, but at the same time, if I think of this album as a concept album, just kind of going back and thinking about where we started from and how we got here. So we were looking at 3 tracks in a row where we were like, definitely there's a sexual element to this. Track 4, kind of, there's allusions to it, but it transitions into this idea of what intelligence is, and the de-evolution concept is being fully fleshed out. We get into Too Much Paranoias. The cause of it is capitalism in the most reductive way I could possibly express that.
Right.
And then we get to Gut Feeling, Come Back Johnny, where it's slightly more conventional, I feel like, in terms of where we're going lyrically. We get back into a sexual element with Sloppy because there's no way of getting around that. And now we're talking about dying. Yeah, so a concept album, not so much, because there's not really a cohesive story necessarily. It sort of starts that way, but it never gets to the end in the same way. I don't know. It's not as clear cut.
Well, I think that so much of what this album is about is in the title, which of course is a lyric from Jocko Homo, Q Are We Not Men, A We Are Devo. And I think what that is really asking is, what does it mean to be alive? That is what they are fundamentally interested in. And when it comes to de-evolution, sort of reducing all life to its most basic components, you're constantly horny. Sometimes you manage to have sex. Sometimes you try to have sex and it doesn't work out.
You missed the whole law.
And then you fucking die. And maybe that's reductive. I don't know. But because I think that there's a lot of texture along the way, but I think it speaks to something very fundamental and very primal about what it means to live. That along the way, as you're between these periods of pleasure, it's not even necessarily pain that you experience. It's mostly just feeling weird.
Yeah, weird feelings. I actually, that's a really good way to kind of sum up the entire album is weird feelings.
Yeah.
Or anxiety, paranoia.
Anxiety. Things that you don't entirely know what to do with. It's just you wish that you didn't have these feelings, and then every once in a while you can make those feelings recede into the background. But ultimately, you're going to find new anxieties to become crippled with, whether it is anxieties about sexuality or it's at the top of the list that you can't get pissed. Don't get too mad. If you get too mad, that's bad, right? No matter what you try to do, no matter what kind of a life you try to live, there are always going to be people who tell you that you're doing it wrong. And so the only way that you can live truthfully, that you can be alive, is to give yourself over to de-evolution and say, yeah, I'm a dumbass. What of it? At least I'm a dumbass who's going to live truthfully based on what I think life ought to be for me.
That's so fitting because the way I see it too is sort of like, when we talk about these anxieties that are paranoia, all these other negative emotions, if you will, there's something that's supposed to be the antidote, which is like the sexual release or consumerism, but it just ends up feeding it. It's a vicious cycle until you just die.
Well, because you can define yourself in relation to these other things, right? And I think you can also see each of these tracks as being about a different way that you can choose to define yourself. Uncontrollable urge based on the things that you try to pursue, satisfaction specifically about like getting women, finding the right woman, maybe praying hands, where you find yourself related to religion, space junk, technology, mongoloid, intelligence, Jocko Homo, social order and structure, too much paranoias, consumerism. Each of these can be seen as a different thing that you want to define yourself against. But ultimately, the way that Devo sees it, if you try to define yourself against anybody other than yourself, it's not going to work out well for you.
Before we end this track-by-track review, there is one little bit of info that I find really interesting. This is courtesy of Alex Brunel from Boogie Boys Basement. He mentions that he's not really sure who sings this track because both Jerry and Mark have claimed to do takes of the song.
On Shrivel Up?
On Shrivel Up, but we don't know which one was used. What do you think, Josh?
Sounds like Jerry to me.
I was thinking the same thing.
It does, because Mark's voice is a little more like, ah! And it doesn't have that texture to it. This sounds like Jerry to me.
I thought the same thing. Mark, however, he's clever. He can do things with his voice besides the anxious, which like we hear the majority. I have to say, by the way, this is such a side topic, but I had so much fun singing along to this once I was able to memorize the lyrics because my geeky waver is Mark Mothersbaugh.
Yeah.
Like I feel spoken to.
Absolutely.
All of us unoperatic voices. He sings for us and I super appreciate that.
I also think like Mark's natural resonators are a little lower. That's the other big thing about it. And you can go forward and you can look at other examples from the catalog where he is kind of doing that. Like on Peekaboo, for instance, off Oh No, It's Devo, you really get a feel for what it's like when he's kind of, oh, and that's, for lack of a better way of putting it, Mark is, oh, and Jerry is, eh.
Yeah, I get what you're saying for sure. And actually that shows up in the way that you hear the shrivel up.
Yeah.
In the more quiet moments of the singing, I think that actually kind of exposes that for sure. So there's your answer, Alex. In case you weren't, if you weren't sure, I think we might have proven it right there.
This is conjecture,
by sound
though.
alone.
I don't fucking know.
Total conjecture.
I wasn't there.
For sure. Take our word for it. Beautiful. Well, that is the end of the track-by-track review. Now we're going to get into some of the other meta information. I wasn't really thinking of going that too deep into the album cover because you could just read the Wikipedia article on this album. It says what it is. The one thing about it that isn't in the article that I found fascinating, again, this is courtesy of the Chapo Trap House interview, that composite that makes that face is of 3 presidents. And specifically, Jerry Casale says it's Jimmy Carter, Lyndon B. Johnson, and Kennedy.
Okay, I can see it. Yeah, I forgot about that piece from the interview. And then, of course, you've got that head on a big golf ball.
Which, funny enough, if presidents are going to go and take time off, what do? They hit the golf course.
They certainly do.
Yeah, fitting. I mean, granted, like a week and a half after I started listening to this album, I ran to the record store and I bought the vinyl because I had to have this in vinyl. And looking at the album cover, it forced me to have to reconcile what this album does to my head and what visual image I'm given to represent what is being said on this album.
It's a pretty horrible image.
It is a giant question mark.
I really don't like looking at that guy.
Me neither, but that's the point,
exactly.
Right? And so it fits. It's just weird. So to briefly talk about the reception of the album, what did other people think about it? This did chart very briefly in the US, but it did peak at number 12 in the UK, stayed on the charts for 7 weeks. That's impressive. Also did really well in Japan, apparently. In the 1978 Village Voice Paz and Jop Critics poll, it hit number 20, and it was sandwiched between Willie Nelson and Bob Dylan. Interesting company. In addition to that review, this album has appeared on all 3 republications of the Rolling Stone 500 Greatest Albums of All Time, for whatever credence you give that list. I have my issues with it, but whatever. Now, lastly, I think musical influence, it is a good idea to look at that. We're going to bring up some examples of that later. But one that I wanted to spotlight here, because we have reviewed XTC on the show multiple times, one of my favorite bands of all time, the song Making Plans for Nigel, which is arguably the most recognizable song from that group, and the backwards drum technique that's on there.
Yeah.
Taken from Satisfaction.
Oh, that's cool.
Very cool. And it's in writing. I have a source for this, so I can provide it in the show notes as well. Very, very cool. Now, what we like to do on this show as well, when we talk about albums, is go into the negatives. And what I mean by negatives is you're listening to this review, you haven't heard the album yet, gonna go listen to it because we've convinced you there's some interesting things that you should consider when you listen to it, but you're about to go in cold turkey. Let's just talk about this, Josh, honestly. What are some of the negatives? What are things that people are going to hear in this album that might turn them off? And let's just prepare them for that.
Well, I think for one thing, the repetition is not for everybody. This is the case throughout most of their work, but Q Are We Not Men in particular. Every song, almost every song, is very, very repetitive. And that's an intentional choice. And if you have a grounding in punk or electronic music, I don't think this will bother you very much.
Now you're used to this.
But if you are coming at it from a different background, maybe you're into like prog rock or something like that, you might find it to get annoying after a while.
Which is interesting to say, because I actually think that the rhythm changes in every song in some way,
yes.
With the exceptions like I think Come Back Johnny. Well, that has a ramp. Even Space Junk I was saying was kind of monotonous, but it has a breakdown in the middle. So there's always something that kind of breaks it up. Even Shrivel Up, you would think there would be like a consistent rhythm. No, they break down too. So it's constant changing. There's not really any sort of comfortable feeling that you get from this album. And I think that is going to be something that turns people away from it. And I just say, stick with it. That is dynamicism.
Definitely.
That is against the mold, something that is interesting and keeps you riveted. And I think that's true in the music. I think it's true lyrically as well.
Well, and something that we also mentioned is that, you have that unbelievably strong 1-2 punch opener. And then from there, it goes right into Praying Hands, which is one of the weakest songs on the album, if not the weakest. And Space Junk is also, both of those feel like loose sketches of a full song, I think. Although, again, I think Praying Hands probably works a lot better live. So they're short. Praying Hands is 2:48. Space Junk is 2:14. So, just hold on. Keep going.
Yep. Completely agree. Next up, we've got Further Listening. You listen to this album, you like this album, what else can you listen to?
Remain in Light by Talking Heads.
Yeah, 100%. I would go to Remain in Light as well. I think that's actually a really good entry point. I also argue for Fear of Music. Also a really good album. Again, kind of with cross-pollination here and there, but I think less so is The Clash. I put down the eponymous album from 1977. I think it's just a collection of great songs that also challenge established norms, and I think The Clash hit it more head-on and get very topical, whereas Devo is a bit more in your head head, really, the headiness is a bit different. And hey, this is the debut of Devo. The next album, Duty Now for the Future, obviously would be the next step. But I actually want to talk about other artists where you can see direct correlations to Devo. And the first band I want to bring up is the Polysix out of Japan. Josh, have you ever heard the Polysix?
Oh, yeah, I know Polysix, yeah. Polysix or Die is that's right, that's their greatest hits album. That's the one that I've listened to. So I wouldn't say I'm super familiar, but I have listened to it. And yeah, no, that's good stuff.
Yep, and I'll drop Kaji Kajaku here just so you can get a sense of how zany they are. You could absolutely hear the Devo comparison. All right, next up, LCD Sound System.
Yes.
I mean, for sure. I bring up the tracks in particular, Tribulations, and also watch the tapes. I think there's a Devo element to watch the tapes off of Sound of Silver. In terms of nerdiness, this idea of like not appealing to anyone but themselves and playing music for themselves. And it just so happens to really revolve around kind of like that 70s in-your-face kind of confrontational musical style with these lyrics that are just sort of self-absorbed, but in a sympathetic way.
Yeah, I think lyrically, Losing My Edge is also a song about de-evolution.
Yes, for sure. Losing My Edge definitely can fit within that as well. Next one I have, if you have not heard this album from 2023, you really got to give it a try. It's by the Viagra Boys. It's called Cave World, and listen to the song Troglodyte. My God, that is absolutely Devo right there.
Okay, I haven't actually heard of this one. I'll have to check it out.
Incredible. It got a lot of notoriety because the Needle Drop listed it as his #1 album for 2023. So that got a lot of attention. I absolutely recommend checking out this band. This album in particular really hits this concept hard and de-evolution from a different perspective. But Troglodyte is the most in your face about it. Dumb Humans Are Dumb. That's my subtitle for that. Okay, I've got one more here. Ariel Pink, also a devotee. The song is Evolution's a Lie, off of the album Sit and Spin from 2010. Need I say more?
I mean, makes sense. This is maybe a little more adjacent to the kind of stuff that Devo was doing a little later, like especially 1982's Oh No, It's Devo. But The Golden Age of Wireless by Thomas Dolby.
Tell me about this album because I have not heard it.
So it is the album that She Blinded Me with Science is on.
Okay.
I mean, really, in a lot of ways, it's more like freedom of choice because that's Devo's album that has Whip It on it. So everybody knows Thomas Dolby for She Blinded Me with Science, but The Golden Age of Wireless is really just a vibes album. And it's the vibe, it's the vibes of what does it feel like when you can only communicate with people remotely?
Oh, interesting. So the Zoom age before Zoom was a thing.
Pretty much, yeah. I think a lot of what's going on there, it is definitely more, I don't know if operatic is the right way of putting it. Probably not. There's probably a better word. But just this real meditation on the vibes of solitude while you are still connected with others. I think it's a really great album. And I think there's a lot of Devo in there.
Oh, fascinating.
Because Devo, they have a very specific idea of what it means to be atomized from each other. And I think that just that concept of loneliness, it's meditated on in an interesting way, a way that's far more European, I would say.
Oh, yeah, of course, because it was not much of a hit here at all besides She Blinded Me with Science.
Yeah, no, Thomas Dolby was always bigger back in his home of England as well as Europe more broadly.
Now we're going to finish up the episode here. There is just so much that we were not able to cover just because there is not enough time in the world. There's so much you could research when it comes to Devo about their history. I definitely recommend people check out some of the books that we mentioned in this. Well, I don't know about Jocko Homo, Heaven Bound, and the beginning was the end, but it is worth checking out their biography as well as some other releases that they put out. There's the Be Stiff single that came out in 1978. It's the third single from the album, even though it's actually not on the album itself, but it's a nice anthemic kind of song. Really interesting. There's also the Be Stiff EP, which came out in 1977. It includes some of the early versions of the songs that we talked about here, as well as Be Stiff is on there. Another song that wasn't on the album's on there as well. So definitely check that out. You will not be able to check out the short film directed by Chuck Statler because from what I hear, it's currently being remastered and not really put out anywhere, but you can actually see it on the Island of Lost Souls DVD that Criterion put out. This is a 1932 film that we didn't really get much into in this review, but heavily influenced Jocko Homo as well. I would recommend if you want to see the short film, you can get that DVD. And as a way to really wrap up this review, I want to really give a special thanks to Alex Brunel at Boogie Boys Basement. Thank you for the stems. Thank you for the information. Thank you for the resources. A lot of great information that led to some of the more informed opinions on this album. And really, it would be a disservice if I did not thank him wholeheartedly here. So thank you very much, Alex. Really appreciate your feedback and helping us guide the conversation along. So before we go, Josh, please tell the lovely people out there where they can hear more of you.
Well, I co-host a podcast called The Worst of All Possible Worlds. Every week we talk about a different piece of pop culture, and we're particularly interested in narratives. The narratives that the media gives us, these different works that are pretty explicit and obvious, as well as some of the narratives that you might have missed. The tagline for the show is Case Studies in the Pop Culture of a Dying Empire. So we're always interested to see how the media that we consume either advances the project of American empire, or I guess global Western hegemony more broadly, or undermines it in a meaningful way. Despite the show's title, we're not just talking about shit that sucks. We do sometimes, but we also love to talk about things that we really, really enjoy and we think are worth playing, listening to, watching, etc. Go check it out. We have a website, worstpossible.world. And if you really like what we're doing, every other week we do an episode that is premium. We put it behind a paywall on our Patreon, which is patreon.com/worstofall.
And you're also directing a play that you have to run off to soon.
I am, yeah. No, by the time this episode comes out, that's going to be over. But that's been fun too. I direct theater sometimes as well. I have a website, joshboerman.com. I try to keep it updated and usually fail, but you can feel free to check that out, or you can follow me on Bluesky, which is at bosh.worstpossible.world.
Thank you very much, Josh, for that, and we'll see you back again for a review of the second album, huh?
Woohoo!
That is our review of Q, Are We Not Men? A, We Are Devo by Devo. We hope you enjoyed this conversation, and if so, like the video and subscribe to the channel to check out more of our reviews and discussions.
We are always interested in hearing what you have to say about the albums we review, so join the discussion in the comments or send us your take on this album to feedback@lo-fidelity.info.
Next time on the show, we are going to analyze and review Duty Now for the Future by Devo. Until then, thank you for listening to Low Fidelity, and we'll see you again in the next episode.